Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mistakes Were Made. We are still here at the dining room table, and we are going to be looking at our investment snapshot, as you can see here, which covers basically the movement of our investments in January, because these numbers were taken within the first week of February. So we're going to jump right in just a moment. If anybody is new, just know that we are DIY investors. We do not have any particular education, experience, knowledge, expertise in investing, or even just finances in general. It's all been self-taught stuff, things that I've learned via books, videos, magazines, just a wide array of resources, but nothing that I'm talking about here is necessarily a suggestion of what someone else should do. This is going to be 1,000% just our situation and what we are choosing to do and how we are pursuing things. I do absolutely recommend, if you have any questions on the financial side and especially about investing, to find a financial advisor that you trust and will have your best interest at heart, and essentially speak with an expert. Because what we're doing, we're trying to be logical about our processes, but at the same time, it is not grounded in any, official learning or teachings or having gone to school or anything like that. So that is something to keep in mind. And as a general rule, I don't typically make suggestions when we're talking about the investment side of things. And I don't anticipate that I will ever talk about a specific holding and go into detail about it as far as, what the name of the holding is or anything like that. I might talk about one in generics of, we invested in this and it did this thing, and so then we made these decisions. But I'm not going to recommend, hey, invest in this, or even say we invested in this specific stock, bond, whatever. So, all right, now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look. Let's see if I zoom in. There we go. I'll still have to adjust this a little bit. So for my particular portfolio, we have a rollover IRA, which used to be my old 401k for my old work. And that is currently at the time of the snapshot, is at $106,248.64. My current 401k, or the new 401k at my new job, is at $3,498.73. Now, I am contributing 6% of my pay towards that, and the company is doing a 5% match for an 11% contribution rate total. Then we also have my Roth IRA, which is currently at $3,053.20. And for the month of January, all told, I invested $505 towards that. Invested, contributed, whichever. I will tell you, behind the scenes, you guys can't see this, but my eye is driving me insane. It's like I had like a little bit of a shooting pain go through just now, and now is like itchy as all get out. So it's bugging the heck out of me. All right, last but not least is crypto. As you can see, it has come down quite significantly, and just as a I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, but it's even lower now as of today, the making of this video. But it is at $23.75. When I bought into crypto, I just didn't feel comfortable but I did want to give it a go. And so I have only invested $30. Now, I would not be surprised if crypto were to continue to tumble. When I was looking into certain things about it, it does seem to have a little bit of a cyclical nature. I don't know that it's anything that's easily patterned to say, oh, well, every 3 years it's going to do this, but it will drop and have these drops. It's not unusual. And some of them have been, a 20% drop. There's been, 50% drop. I don't know if it's the biggest drop, but there has even been an 80% drop. So if it continues to go, there's a great chance that I will lose the the remainder of the $30 that I have into it. But I knew how volatile it was. I knew, it wasn't something that I would feel super invested in, which I guess, is that a pun? Maybe that is a pun. As far as emotionally or anything like that, it was very much an experiment. And so I only put in what I felt I would be comfortable losing, and that was $30. Now, I would not be surprised if there are a lot of people out there, particularly the ones that are heavily invested in it or really love Bitcoin and stuff like that. Because that is the crypto that I am invested in is Bitcoin. I don't know if I've ever, been blatantly said what it was. That they will look at these downturns and probably rightfully so if you're, looking at it from a pure, here's an opportunity thing, as an opportunity to get into crypto at a lower rate, or lower cost. It's a strategy. I'm not going to knock anybody for it. I think for me, it would have to drop a fairly significant amount for me to want to or feel comfortable investing an amount that is significant enough that it would make sense should it then come back. So, come back up. So I'm still, it's just, I know a lot of people love it, but it's just not quite for me. So I'm not one that is going to take advantage of this current dip. Maybe if it drops, even more significantly, then I'll reassess. But for right now, I have no real urge to do anything. All right, so if we add all of these together, we come to a total of $112,824.32. Now, Mr. M, his portfolio is a little bit different. He's got the company stock, which is at $54,156.90. And this is probably, no, I don't know if the Bitcoin might take the cake for this, but at least what has the most heavily invested monies, this is our most, what is the word that I'm thinking of now? Volatile item, because it lives and dies off of the reputation of the company that he works for. And good, bad, whatever comes that company's way, however, if they meet their goals, and sometimes even if they do, it's not necessarily enough. If they miss a projection or something like that, or if bad news or bad press comes out, it can highly affect the value of the stock. And so we could see this fall down really, really quickly. It could also go the other direction and shoot up really, really quickly as well. So This is one of those ones where, unfortunately, we are not in a position to transition it to something else. Something about the vesting rules or some, I'll be honest, I don't really remember what he said, but most likely we will be keeping it as is until we're ready to retire. And then this will be, assuming that all the rules allow it, I would assume so because he will be retired at that point. This would be the first thing that we would tap to pull money out to use as our income, because it is so volatile and because it can change as almost at the whim of what people think about the company itself. So we would want to pull the money out of there and either put it somewhere else that's a little bit more stable, or we'll just be using it to cover our costs in retirement. His 401k is currently at $215,911.72, which is fantastic. We do have a plan that if he ends up getting a raise, then whatever that percentage is, half of it will go to boosting his contribution rate on the 401k, and then the other half, of course, we would see the impacts of that in his take-home pay. So, if it was a 2% raise, then he'd increase his contribution by 1%, and we would see the other 1% in his pay. And I think that, for me, I think that's a really great way to take advantage of an increase in pay, because on the one hand, you are helping to further, future use situation, helping to build that base without really affecting what you already have going on, because with the raise, that's new money coming in. You've been used to living on, $1,000 per pay period, and now you get this raise and it's going to give you an additional $50 per the pay period. Well, you weren't using that before, so if you were to divert some of that increase to go towards your 401k, it's not going to harm the budget that you have already created, and yet you're going to have the benefit of increasing your investment in the future. Plus, doing it this way, you still will see an increase in the take-home pay. So at that point, you can then decide how you want to handle that increase in the take-home pay. Are you going to, use it to further your debt reduction plans, to help, it might be only a little bit, but help the savings for your emergency fund. Maybe it's going to give you a little bit of breathing room or a buffer in your checking account. Or maybe you've been at this, for a while and you have given up a lot of things, and having an extra $50 per paycheck means you can finally treat yourself a little bit. All of those are very valid choices. And for me, because you have essentially put some of that towards your future with the bumping up your investing in your 401k, you're kind of helping to guard against lifestyle creep, because you aren't having the full effect of the raise in your paycheck. It's already, some of it's already been put aside for something else. And then it'll just be up to you on the rest, on how you're going to handle that and whether lifestyle creep gets you a little bit. So anyway, next we have his Roth IRA, which is currently at $3,055.20, which of course he also had $505 that he contributed over the course of January. So all told, he is at $273,123.82, and we are at $385,948.14 combined. So when we look at our big goals, and again, if there is anybody new, by the way, welcome. The big goals that and the small goal that we have created, these are purely like math problems. Really. There is no nuance to them. It is a simple thought process of here is the cost that we want to essentially assume we'll have in retirement. And that for this big one, it's $6,000. That is the number that we use across the board for our planning, our financial planning, because it has a built-in buffer already, and we like to assume higher costs rather than ones that are more aligned with what we're actually spending or even lower as a general rule. So that's just $6,000 multiplied by 12 to get the $72,000 a year, and multiply that 72 times 30 years for the retirement picture. Same thing with the small goal. Again, utilizing that $6,000 starting point. One of the kind of rules of thumb or thought processes out there is that your costs in retirement will essentially be 25% less than they are now. There are certainly a number of assumptions that are in place when people come up with that number, that calculation. But when you use that, if we take 25% from our $6,000, that puts us at $4,500 per month. Multiply that by 12, I think that's like $54,000, and then multiply that by 30, and you get to the $1.62 million level that we have. Currently, we are 17.87% of the way to the big goal and 23.82% of the small goal. Now, this is definitely a lofty goal, especially because our timeline for retirement, if we stick with the plan that we have, it's longish, but it's also so very short. It's 10 years. We are looking to retire in 2036. And because we did not focus on investing, because we had some very poor financial decision making and planning and things like that previously, we have not utilized our youth as well as we could have as far as investment and getting prepared for retirement is concerned. So while we both had 401ks and were contributing to those, my rate of contribution, especially at the very beginning, was pretty low. And so, those number of years of compounding, I did get some benefit from that, of course, but obviously if I had contributed more, then I would be in an even better position. And the same thing for Mr. M. I mean, he's doing pretty good with where he is, but there's always a hindsight is 2020, looking back and, if only I had done this, and I could have set myself up so much better and things like that. So are these goals right here achievable? If we're looking at what our rate of investment is right now, it's really unlikely. I mean, if I'm being very, very, honest and clear, I would be surprised if we would be able to, even over the course of 10 years, invest enough to get us to these numbers. But the good thing about, or I don't know if it's a good thing, but one of the things to keep in mind about this is, again, these are very static. They are very generic, general numbers. They don't take into account the fact that, your spending as a general rule, and there's studies that have shown this, tends to decline in retirement, and not just the whole 25% fewer, less costs, but your actual spending usually goes down as you get older. Maybe it's because you're a little bit more infirm and you're not up to getting out and doing things. You're not necessarily consuming as much. And that's both, like on the food side of things, as well as, just going out and purchasing a bunch of stuff. Though I don't know if anybody has kind of taken a look at the folks that love like the home shopping networks and stuff like that. I know my grandma used to buy some eyebrow raising things, and we would be like, why on earth did you order that? There was not really a good need for it. I mean, she wasn't like a hoarder or anything like that, and she never put herself in a financially difficult position, but she would definitely purchase some stuff, and it'd be like, all right. But as a general rule, as you do get older, you typically don't consume as much, and so your spending will taper over the years. And so this does not take that into account. The other thing that this doesn't do, and this was part of a kind of a purposeful thought process, is it does not take into account any Social Security that we might get. Like I said, that was purposeful. It's kind of the route that we took when we were putting together our job loss fund. Was we wanted to put ourselves in a position where if something went wrong with unemployment, being able to utilize that benefit, something happened. So either I couldn't utilize it at all, or it was at a lesser level than we might have thought. We weren't reliant on that to be able to pay our bills. And we kind of have that same thought process for retirement, but we also absolutely recognize that we just don't have the baseline and the timeline to really get to this position where we could afford to cover all of our costs at $4,500 a month for the entirety of our retirement, or $6,000 a month for the entirety of our retirement ourselves. But it is still something worth pursuing, because of course the closer that we do get, the better off we are. Even if we are having to utilize Social Security to help with the process. Okay, I do have some more items that I really want to, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, go over that gets a little bit more in depth about how we are assessing our investment situation, how we are assessing our retirement plans. But I forgot my calculator, and I don't know if I'm going to need it, so you're not going to notice that it's that long, but I'm going to put you on pause, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I've got my handy dandy calculator here. Let me flip over to a page full of numbers. So I'm just going to leave this here. If people want to look ahead, and that's totally cool with me. One of the things that we have kind of decided on is we are childless. We don't really have any charities or things like that we are so passionate about that we want to create a legacy to support them. We do have nieces and nephews, but ensuring that there is money left over after we pass is not really something that we are super interested in. I don't think that there is a way for us to create a process that helps guard against us outliving our portfolio or outliving our retirement funds, and also doesn't leave any money behind. So I think there's going to be some sort of legacy no matter what. But one of the things that I have learned as I'm watching videos and reading up on things is, in a lot of cases, whether it's by design or not, a lot of people pass with a ton of money that they haven't actually utilized in their retirements. And in a lot of cases, more than what they retired with. And for us, we would much rather make sure we're doing the best we can to enjoy the experiences, have the memories, and create all that, and utilize our resources to do that, especially earlier on in the retirement years, rather than waiting and then being in a position where we can't do things as much or as well, just from a health and, age standpoint, or being too afraid to use the money because, you don't want to end up being retired and penniless and having to worry about covering all the various costs that especially tend to pile up as you get older. And in the end, end up, passing with like $1 million or $2 million or something like that. I don't know if that would be really likely, but I know it happens. So one of the things that we have kind of put together, and I say we, but I will be honest, Mr. M kind of leaves the finance research stuff up to me because I am so obsessive about it and I do enjoy it. And I will say also, I am guilty of utilizing AI for questions that I have in certain respects, mostly on how to calculate things. So anything that I learn or that I put together, and especially things that I've documented here, I'm always taking them with a grain of salt. So I'm not at the point where I'm like, oh yeah, AI is infallible. But I figure that when we are talking about a little bit more complex calculations, ones that I don't feel comfortable doing myself because I am not a math gal, I think that as a general rule, it's probably going to be okay. But again, anything that I have learned through that process, I do still take with a grain of salt. And I'm not like, yes, that's totally what's going to happen. And this is set in stone and we've got everything figured out, so we're good to go. No. All right, so what do we have here? So here is our bucket strategy. And essentially, we have determined, because we want to retire in 10 years, there's going to be multiple stages in our retirement. And the first stage is essentially the self-funding stage. That is going to be the time period where we have retired, but we don't have any Social Security coming in at all. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is going to be the staggered Social Security stage A, I guess you could call it. And that is going to be the time period between when Mr. M is able to get his Social Security, because we are both planning to take Social Security at 67 at our full retirement age. We don't want to take it earlier, and at this point, we don't want to take it later. And then there's going to, so there's that stage. And then the last stage is going to be the Social Security stage B, and that will be the time frame where both of our Social Security has kicked in, and that will take us to the end of our, kind of retirement plan. So I've run a ton of different numbers, but this that I'm going to go over is, again, kind of like the numbers for our big and our small goal. There are nuances that are not part of the calculation. There are things that would be happening that aren't taken into account with these numbers. So it is a little bit more nuanced, but it still falls kind of in a generic realm too. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to try, there we go. We'll zoom in here. So what are we talking about? Well, first and foremost, our main goal has always been $6,000 a month. Okay. Now, the idea is going to be I would retire at age 60. Mr. M would be 63. We both plan to take Social Security at 67. So, like I said, the first bucket is going to be 100% and funded by our investments and savings. There's no Social Security involved. And that will be year 1 through 4. Okay. And so $6,000 a month, 12 months, $72,000 a year for 4 months, $288,000. That's how much it would cost to fund that particular portion of our retirement. Now, bucket 2 is years 5 through 7. That's the 3 years where we would have Mr. M's Social Security applying, but mine is not yet available. Okay, so what we did, so for the Social Security piece, this is right now the part that's going to be fairly up in the air. Mr. M does not know what his Social Security statement is yet. I've talked to him about, kind of checking into that, and he's had some troubles with the website, so I need to kind of keep poking him so that I can get a little bit better idea of what we're really working with. For me, because my wage was much higher in the past, even last year, surprisingly, I'm doing my taxes. I was actually quite surprised that my wage was what it was. And the year before, the statement that I have is based on the idea that the wage that I earned in 2024 is going to be the wage that I will have until I choose to take Social Security. And I already know that that's not going to be the case because the new job that I have, I earn less than I did before. So with that in mind, I've kind of done some guesstimate ideas of what we might be seeing. For Mr. M, I did $2,000. And the reason I did that is, I guess the average, which of course is not always the best number to utilize, but the average for somebody taking Social Security was, I watched the video a few days ago. I think it was like $2,058, $38, something like that. For myself, I've decided, well, let's go with $1,800. Now, I would think the logical thing for me to do is say, oh, well, if a single individual usually has $2,000, we'll just say $38 as the standard Social Security they get. I'm a single individual because, we're not married, so I should have $2,000 as well, right? Right, it makes sense. But what was interesting is in the videos that I was watching is the married couple Social Security total was actually like $3,089 maybe. It was definitely not $4,000. And I was like, okay. And so I think a lot of that is they're taking the individual plus the spouse getting the spousal balance or whatever it's called, so, which ends up being less than what an individual would get. And I don't know if that's because as a typical or general rule, when we're talking spouses, it's usually a man and a woman, and very likely there would be either a decision to be a stay-at-home mom, whether that's like for the entirety of their, the time that their children are young, or even just the entirety of their marriage, or maybe there's a portion of the time that they are out of the workforce, or maybe even there is a nod to the fact that women often make less than men do. I'm not sure why the married couple is calculated as a lesser total than just taking two individuals and mapping it together. But that's what it was. So for me, I was like, okay, I will do like 1800, because again, I know what my Social Security statement says that I should be getting now, but I also know that that is based on a wage that's like roughly $20,000 more than what I am earning now. So it felt like the heck kind of word is that? It felt reasonable to do 1800. Okay, so here we are. We are back and getting to these calculations. So in the second bucket, we know we want the 6,000, but we are also knowing that we're going to have the $2,000 from Social Security for Mr. M. So that drops our monthly cost towards our investments to $4,000. Multiply that by 12, you get 48,000. So for those 3 years, it's the cost to us is $144,000, right? And then we get to the last bucket, which is year 8 through 30. It's a 23-year time span. We're planning with the idea of being around until we're 90. It could be longer, it could be shorter, of course. So this is the decision that we made for our planning purposes. So we start with our 6,000. We have 2,000 for Mr. M. We have 1,800 for me, or a total of 3,800 coming in to offset that cost. And that leaves us with 2,200 a month that would need to be coming out of our investments. So you multiply that by 12, it gives you 26,400. Multiply that by 23 years, and we're at $607,200. So if you add those different buckets up, the total cost for this span of retirement ends up being $1,039,200. Another thought process that I did was I also kept in mind that the Social Security Administration is already saying, hey, if something doesn't change by the year 2034, we're not going to be able to provide people with their full retirement benefits. We are going to be able to do like roughly 20%. So if you're supposed to get $1,000, unfortunately, you would only get, I think it was 810 was the example that I read on the website, or maybe it was even on my paperwork. So with that idea, I said, okay, well, what happens if we reduce our guesstimate by 25%? Still being ultra conservative. That drops Mr. M's amount to $1,500 and mine to $1,350. So that does change some of the numbers. Now, the first number, I don't know why I did this backwards. The first bucket doesn't change because it wasn't going to be affected by Social Security anyway. But the second bucket does go up some to $162,000, and then the last bucket does increase as well, $869,400, for a total of $1,319,400. So we're getting a little bit closer to that small goal. Now, I ran those same numbers if we were wanting to see where we would land if we had $4,500 as our cost throughout the retirement, as well as $3,800. And so those numbers obviously become more and more favorable, even when we're looking at a 25% reduction in Social Security For the 4,500, we're looking at 216,000, then 90,000, then 193,200 for a total of $499,200 needed to cover the length and the breadth of our retirement. I'll get to that. With it being 25% less, then we're looking at instead 216,108 and then 455,400 for a total of $779,400. And then if we look at $3,800, it's even better, 182,400, then 64,800, and then, and this one's really interesting, and of course it would absolutely require the Social Security calculation to be right, as once we got to both of our Social Securities kicking in, if our monthly costs are 3,800, our Social Security is 3,800, so there would be no more money coming out of the investments, and that would be at zero. And in this scenario, we would absolutely expect to end up passing away with at least as much as we started, if not more. But if you add that all together, then we're at $247,200 for the standard Social Security cost. Now, if Social Security were to be reduced by 25%, that does change things because we have the $182,400, $82,800 in the middle, and then the remainder ends up being $262,200 for a total of $527,400. Now then, take a moment to kind of drink this all in. I had a blast figuring these, calculating all of these out. This is the stuff that I live for. I don't know why it's so fun, but I just love thinking of scenarios and mathing it out and seeing what it is and all that. Now, what I did ask AI to do is I gave them, some parameters. Here's what our investments are now. I think I used the 385,000 that we currently have. And I said, here's how much on average we are contributing to our investment every year. And that's between 401k, company match, Roth IRA contributions, the whole shebang. And that number comes to roughly $30,000. I think that might be a smidge high, but $30,000 per year is what we're using for the calculation. And then with what I think is a fairly moderate return rate, because I think typically most people use 7% or 8% for what they think the market is going to do, or historically what the market has done over the course of a long, when you're looking at the long history. I said, let's assume a 6% rate of return for the next 10 years. And the calculation that came back is that we would get to $1,068,000, right? So if that were to occur, and we're looking at these fairly static numbers, then this dollar amount means we could fund all of these scenarios except for this one, where it's the $6,000 for the course of the retirement, but the Social Security expectation has been reduced by 25%. So that's the basically the only one that kind of becomes a problem. Now then, I gotta check my little notes. Okay, so one big thing that this doesn't take into account, huge thing that this doesn't take into account, is the fact that even though we would be looking at removing, $72,000 each year, or where are we on $54,000 each year, $45,000 each year. The fact of the matter is, it's not going to be just a chunk of money that's sitting in an account doing nothing. There's no activity going on with it. If we were self-funding 100% out of a savings account, then I suppose maybe that might be the situation. But these are going to be active. I'm assuming these are going to be active investments that we are hopefully enjoying some sort of rate of return on. So if we were to get to this $1,068,000 and we're taking $72,000 out, first and foremost, it's for a short period of time. This would be more than the typical, I think, safe rate of return that a lot of people look to. And if you hear clickety clacketing, it's because I'm doing a calculation on the calculator over here. It comes to roughly 6.7%. 72,000 is 6.7% of 1 million. So much higher than that 4% or 4.5% rate that most people tout. But it would only be for 4 years. And over the course of that 4 years, we would still be expecting to have some sort of rate of return. And if we use the 6% kind of guideline that we did to get to how much will we have at the start of retirement, then we'll still see a reduction in our investments, because this is going to be 6.7%, but part of that will be offset by the investments as they're growing. And then if we go and we look and we say, okay, well, 144,000, that's going to be $48,000 a year. I don't know exactly how much money we'll actually have at the end of this, but we'll just say, let's say we get down to 900,000. Oops, I need to not do it that way. But we'll take 48,000 and divide it by 900,000. That would be 5.3%. And is that a valid place for us to think about? You know what? I'm not sure. Why don't we do this? I don't know how accurate this is as a process, but we're going to give it a go. We're starting at 1,068,000. I'm going to subtract 72,000, and then I'm going to add 6%. Is this the right way to go about it? I don't know. I'm not a math whiz, but this is the way we're going to do it. So that's year one. Take our 72,000 out again, and now we're going to add our 6% for the year. It's year two. 72,000 again. Add 6%. Year three. 72,000 and add our 6%. So actually, according to this very rudimentary and probably super wrong way of doing it, we would be still over $1 million. And then the next level is taking out $48,000. And then ultimately, when we get to the last portion, we're taking out $26,400. So it's going down every single time. And so the expectation would be that percentage of withdrawal that we're doing is going to be lower, and thus very likely, even in this scenario, we're going to see those investments or that portfolio grow beyond where it started, because we're not going to be pulling as much out. So the biggest thing for this is, of course, figuring out what is actually the right way to calculate the addition that the investing part of things does, the compounding or rate of return, the impact that it has, and being able to get to this point to make sure it would all work. So what I did as another thought process was like, okay, what if we wanted to retire early? So let's take this number as okay, here's what we're going to work with. Again, grain of salt, may not happen, because there's a lot of different things that went into the calculation of that, expectations that would need to be met. But let's just say this is where we're expecting to be at the time of retirement. Where do we need to be at minimum? If our plan is $6,000 per year with Social Security kicking in at the rate that we just discussed, we're assuming 6% returns. What is the amount we would actually need to have day one following that rule? And for our normal timeline, that 10 years out, 2036, according to the math and AI, so again, don't take it for gospel, but we're gonna go with the information it gave, we would need $600,000 to cover this plan. So even though the full cost of the retirement based off of the numbers is $1,039,200, we wouldn't need that much at the start of retirement in order to work this budget, because the expectation is you would be getting returns on the money that is still in your investments. So, then the calculation needs to be, well, where do you need to start to be able to afford those things? And according to the math that it did, 600,000 is the answer. Now, if we wanted to retire 3 years earlier than that, so in 2033, we wanted to run that same concept. What would our start need to be in order to do the $6,000 cost? And again, this is a static number. It's assuming every single year of our retirement, we are going to be funding $6,000. Some of that is coming from Social Security, and some of that's coming from our investments as we went through, but it's not following the rule of thumb or I guess the thought process that as time goes on, you spend less. So this number ends up being static, and that has an impact too. But we would need to be at $760,000. And if we wanted to retire 5 years earlier, then so that would be 2031, we would need to have $900,000 on day one in our investments. And now these numbers all look doable when we're looking at the initial calculation, but the thing to keep in mind about that one is that was based on us having 10 full years of additional investing going on, as well as the compounding, et cetera, et cetera. So we also had calculations done on having a 7-year timeline and having a 5-year timeline. And the 7-year, it's kind of hard to read because I don't know what I was doing, was $830,000 is how much we would presumably have compounded up to if we were going to retire in 7 years, and $680,000 in 5 years. So matching the things up, this one looks, on the surface like it would be fairly doable, because there is a $70,000 difference between how much we would be proposed to have and how much it's saying that we would need to have at the beginning. So that's a pretty decent buffer. For the 900,000 though, that's really far off. 680,000, but you need to have $900,000 at the beginning. Obviously, that doesn't look like the math is going to work. Now, I keep saying it was me. I did the same calculations for the other different bucket options. So if we were going to retire on our normal timeline with the expectation that we were going to have $4,500 of costs every single month throughout the entirety, on day one, we'd need $340,000 to afford that, because the compound interest should put us in a position to afford the entirety of our retirement. If we wanted to retire 3 years earlier, $470,000, and if we wanted to retire 5 years earlier, we'd need $560,000. So this scenario, all of those appear, at least on paper, to be doable. $340,000 needed. Where are we? We would have well over that according to the calculations. 470,000, again, still like half-ish of what we would be expected to have. And then 560,000 being needed. It's not quite half, but it's still a very nice buffer in there. And then finally, 3,800, it would be $220,000 would be needed against the $1 million, 310 against the 830, and then 370 against the 650. So almost all of these look on paper, like they would be doable. They would require sticking to a budget that means that we're not going over what these different levels are, but it's also very much based on no changes to the outlay that we are expecting throughout the entirety of the 30-year retirement window we are using, which isn't likely to be accurate. So one other thing that I did was I was like, okay, what is more likely is that we would want to have a higher level earlier on of income to be able to utilize, and then it would start to drop. And so I'll be honest, I can't remember exactly what the parameters that I put together were, but I believe I'm pretty sure, but I've run so many different numbers that I'm not 100% sure, that it was something like $6,000 per year for, maybe 10 years, and then $4,500 for another 7, and then $3,800 for the remainder of the retirement period. And then running that gave us a need to have $565,000 on day one if we wanted to retire in 2031, and $510,000 on day one if we wanted to retire in 2033. And both of those do seem very doable, particularly considering where our investments are currently. And a lot of these seem like they could be achievable, especially if we do look at, well, this is what the potential is saying we could get. There's a lot of opportunity here. I did run another number scheme, and that one was mimicking what our income is now for a period of time, and then dropping down to like the 6,000, 4,500, 3,800 levels throughout, the remainder of the retirement. And one of the reasons why I ran that is one of the biggest issues with an option of retiring early is at least for right now, the numbers seem to match up for us to be able to pay our house off by the time we are planning on retiring in 2036. So if we did want to retire 3 years earlier, that would mean we would have 3 years of mortgage that we still need to pay. And of course, we would be looking at, and then if we retired 5 years earlier, there would be 5 years of mortgage we still needed to pay, where we would be expecting we'd be paying. And the biggest problem is we would no longer have the income that we are currently experiencing, which currently allows us to have the discretionary money at the end of each pay period that is going towards our ability to pay extra on the mortgage. And that extra payment process that we're doing is what is pushing us to be able to hopefully pay that mortgage off by the 2036 retirement date. So in order for us to still be able to maintain that level of extra payment strategy, we would actually need to have more than $6,000 available, I think. This is where it always gets, kind of crunchy when you're forward looking and also kind of assessing what you're doing now and how is that going to all play off each other, because right now our costs do not add up to $6,000. I think they're at like roughly $5,300. I might be a little bit off on that, but $5,300. So yes, right there's about a $700 buffer. And so just on the surface, that looks like, oh, well, that would be doable if you want to have your costing for the month be $6,000 and you need to be paying on your mortgage, but also doing extra payments. Right now, I think our extra payments are about $600 per month. But the problem with that is I would anticipate we would still want to be funding an emergency fund. Maybe not to, it wouldn't be for the same reasons, because once you're retired, you're not worrying about losing the income from a job, but you still might need or want to have a chunk of cash available or something that's fairly liquid if there is like a bad month or year with the markets. And so you don't want to be selling some of your investments in a down market or at a loss to fund, your lifestyle. So if you have money in a cash account or something, then you would presumably be able to pull money from there instead. Additionally, I doubt that we will be able to get all of the deferred maintenance that we need to get done on the house in the next 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, whatever timeline it actually ends up being. So continuing to have a long-term goal bucket would be important to us. And those two, at least right now, get funded at the same level that the the mortgage gets paid down. So having $600, $700 extra to work with is all well and good, but it would mean we would have to dial back pretty significantly on funding some of the other areas that currently are a priority and have a level of importance. Now that said, there are some other areas that we would be able to create room. First and foremost, we have $500 per month that is going to investing. I don't know if other people, once they go into retirement, do continue to invest. Maybe they do. I have no idea. But I don't anticipate that we will want to do that. So that would be a reduction of that $5,300 and bring us down to like $4,800. So there would be another $500 in the budget on paper, and so some of that could go to emergency fund and to the long-term goals. So there may be an opportunity of some wiggle room, a way to make that work, even if we wanted to retire a little bit earlier, and we would still be carrying the mortgage payments into retirement. If we were going to do that, we really would want to do our best to still maintain the timeline that we are kind of looking and hoping for now, of having the mortgage still paid off by 2036. So we would only be carrying that mortgage payment for 3 years into retirement, and then that would go away. And of course, that would create even more bandwidth in our actual costs that are the more static costs. And then, of course, if we're looking at, hey, for a period of time, it's going to be a $6,000 lifestyle that we are hoping to maintain, then that would give us a lot of buffer to, once all the things have been paid off, to be able to, have some of that lifestyle creep that we have been really diligently trying to avoid right now, to have that space to do some of the more frivolous and the more fun and the things that financially we are not taking advantage of right now. We want to have that full retirement lifestyle, and the more budget room we have, the better we can afford to do those things, should there be a cost to it that we haven't necessarily anticipated or something like that. So those are the numbers. Again, how likely are these numbers? I don't know. I don't know what the future is. I don't know if the amounts that the calculations came up with are realistic. We obviously have no idea what the market's going to do, and that's going to be an incredibly big piece of the puzzle. A lot of the growth for our investments, for our retirement, is based on investment growth. There's only so much that we are going to be able to contribute to our investments. And mostly I'm talking about what we're putting into our Roth IRAs over the course of 5, 7, or 10 years. We definitely need the benefit of the stock market bringing a typical 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 400, whatever percent return year after year, however long of a span we have before retirement, to help us build that nest egg, build that day one dollar amount. But the good news is, if these numbers are mostly accurate, it gives us a path, and it gives us a sense of, it's not all just, oh, we need to have $2 million. We need to have $1 million plus in order to be able to afford retirement in the way that we think. No, maybe we only need 600,000. I mean, it's more than what we have right now, but that's far more in reach than $2.1 million. Maybe we only need 760. Maybe we'll only need 565 on day one, because the compounding of investments is such an integral part of the process. And of course, we can't underestimate the huge impact that Social Security has in reducing how much pressure we need to put on our investments, because we've got that stable floor of X number of dollars every month that we can rely on. So yeah, one of the things that I really, really need is for Mr. M to fight with that website so that we can get an idea of what it looks like he will be receiving for Social Security. And of course, we can always take that with a little bit of grain of salt and back down whatever number that is by, $100, $500, whatever feels like a good conservative but still kind of close number, and rework some of the calculations that we have done. I'm really not thinking I'm going to have anything super accurate probably until 2027, after I've had this year, 2026, full year of what my current wage is, and then being able to see what impact that has on the numbers that the Social Security Administration puts together. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air. If we stick with our current timeline, 10 years is a long time. It's a long time. It can go by really quick, but is still a long time, and so many different things can happen that can ultimately impact where we land, whether that's a job loss, a health issue, maybe we win the lottery. Doesn't always have to be bad news. Maybe something amazing happens and we win the lottery, or there's some long lost relative that has been watching from afar and decided that they would put us in the will. Not that I would want to have to rely on somebody passing away for me to get some kind of financial boost, but it's those things. All right. Oh my goodness. So it is almost 6:30 in the morning, and my eyes are really tired, so I need to go to bed. This has been a very long video. If you are not a fan of long videos, I do apologize, but we had a whole lot of stuff to go over. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, I'd love to hear them. What are your thoughts about some of the things that I've kind of calculated out? Even if the numbers aren't 100% right, what are your thoughts about just how we are looking at the retirement question and some of the things that we are kind of anticipating will be helpful or useful for our planning purposes? Do you do anything similar? Is there a particular way that you are setting up or planning to set up your retirement path? I'd absolutely love to know, because, again, I am constantly learning, looking for new information, and in different ways that I can potentially help us achieve what our ultimate goal is, and that is to retire essentially as early as we possibly can without jeopardizing the level of comfort and security that we want to have while in retirement. So yeah, I look forward to seeing your guys' thoughts. I want to thank you for sticking with me if you did, and for just watching in general. I hope you have a wonderful day. I am going to go to bed. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.